We've got another exciting creative for you guys to talk to today. Dustin Black is the ECD at Preston Spire, where he leads the agency's award-winning creative team with curiosity and bold thinking. With over 25 years of experience in the advertising industry, he's worked at top agencies including BBDO, Colle+McVoy, Mono, and Carmichael Lynch, crafting standout work for brands like Perdue, Frank's RedHot, Craftsman, Subaru, and MSNBC. Dustin's creative leadership has earned recognition from Clio, Cannes, The One Show, D&AD, Effie, and other major industry awards. Beyond advertising, he's author of The Book of Spam, an entrepreneur and an advocate for blending strategy, art direction, and the human insight into creative work. Dustin, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you making some time for us. I know most creatives are busy this week, whether they have a dog in the show or not, but appreciate you coming on and saying hi and chatting with the audience a little bit.
No, thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Let's go. All right. So tell me about, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And how did you get into the business? I think we've got a lot of young people and a lot of people who want to get into the creative side of the industry. They might work in other disciplines. So I think origin stories are always fascinating places.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually started off in engineering down in Nebraska. I call it the cultural hub of the United States. So grew up down there in Nebraska, started off in engineering and moved into architecture. And one day realized I just wanted shorter creative bursts. And really spent, I was in my classes of the engineering, and I was like, these are not my people. And finally found advertising, which is a group of people that are kind of weird, quirky, really curious people that are always trying to do something new or create something interesting. And so started there, did 3 or 4 internships, and got a job offer up at BBDO. And so right away went up and started doing Hormel advertising and spam and all the processed meats. And so it was a great way to get my start right off the bat. And that's kind of where the book ended up coming from. I did the ads for 5 or 6 years, and my partner and I were like, we've got this collection of unused jokes. We should do something with it. And we went to my creative director and I was like, we're going to do a book. We're not going to do it through the agency. And he was like, sure, good luck with that pipe dream. And we went down to Hormel and said, we need a licensing agreement. And they're like, yeah, sure, good luck with that pipe dream. But we ended up getting an agent, and Simon & Schuster bought it, and we internationally published it back several years ago. So yeah,
that's fun.
But it's really I think I've always had this just curiosity and try something and learn something new. And that's kind of where the book itch was, is I've never done a book. I have no idea how to do this, but I don't know, let's just try it. What's the worst that could happen? And we ended up getting the book. And for a while I'd be driving to work and I'd pull over and have to call a Korean radio show to get on a radio program and talk about it. And so it led to a lot of really interesting life experiences. But just part of how do you find that creativity and find what drives you?
I love it. So was the book kind of like a coffee table book about spam, or tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah. 236 pages of full color, life of spam, where it came from, all the myths about it. And we made it like a magazine. So it was, you could turn to any page and sort of read, and it would be digestible, but it was pretty tongue in cheek and meant to be very funny. But the pitch was pretty easy to Hormel. It's the same guys that are doing your advertising are just going to do some branded content. And they were like, sure, let's try it. And to their credit, they really let us, get away with quite a bit and have a lot of fun with it.
It's interesting. There's kind of a big hearkening to nostalgia brands. I have a toothpaste that's very it's bad that I don't know the name of it, but the good thing is I know that it's a toothpaste that's been around since 19 something. And it's a very old timey kind of no frills design packaging metal tube. And I feel like there's this nostalgia brand, especially in CPG, also back to rediscovering brands that were maybe went out of business and are getting revived, that have been around for a long time, that have history. I don't know if it's just because I'm an ad nerd like you, but I spend the weekends at flea markets and
Yeah.
antique stores looking for old looking for old magazines, looking for old billboards and signs and memorabilia from, brands. I wonder, you know, there's like, and then Walmart launched a museum recently. Like you can go to Bentonville and like see the original, like see the whole progression of the brand from the beginning. Do you think kind of like branded history storytelling, is that having a moment for a reason? And were you kind of early to that, maybe just by accident almost in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, nostalgia is a powerful thing, right? Like, your mind kind of washes, the past to this sort of like how much better it was, or the good memories and the feelings you had. And so tapping into that nostalgia, for brands is a super powerful way to sort of short circuit the connection and get you into that feeling and that mode and stuff. And so I think brands are trying to find ways to compete against the D2Cs and the pop-ups that are just like coming up overnight and stealing their lunch. And so when there is this storytelling, when there is this brand, when there's DNA, it's worth tapping into because it's not the fly by night. It's established, or it's been around, or it's what your mom or your, grandma or grandpa or whatever had. So I think there is just something to the legacy brands trying to like, differentiate themselves and say, no, we've been around, we've been a part of your family and your legacy for a while, come back to us or stay with us. And I think that's probably what Walmart's trying to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's also this kind of idea of like brand discovery or rediscovery or relaunch. Like there's this, I'm from Santa Barbara, and there's this guy who was traveling in Japan, and he went into an antique store in Japan, or like a retro, like thrift store or something like that. And he found these shoes called CVs, and he'd never seen them before. They look kind of like Vans meets a boat shoe or something like that. And he got obsessed with them. He bought them, and he came back, and then he like found the license, and he relaunched CVs. They're like a thriving footwear company now. So I think there's also this kind of like idea of like brand archaeology or like brand rebirth, where like there are these brands for whatever reason have gone out of business at some point, licensing rights expire, things like that. And I think people like a good comeback story for some
Yeah.
reason.
And I mean, it's so applicable across all of pop culture, right? I mean, look at, the appeal of Stranger Things or Kate Bush popping up, or like,
Yeah.
we were talking about, we have kids of similar age and how fun it is to sort of introduce them to, Nirvana or, Bush or whatever, like stuff that was like, very instrumental to our, youth or growing up and stuff. And you're like, no, 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 like you got to understand. And you kind of connect the stories for them, or like, this is Run DMC and this is what you need to know about that, whatever. And so like, even just from like a parenting or like, how do you continue that story? There is like such a lot of excitement of like, I want you to be part of something that I'm, I love.
Yeah, that's fun. My my daughter's had a Nirvana shirt, and she called it Nirvana, and she had never listened to a song, but like for whatever reason, it's the hot item in Tilly's, and that's what their kids are wearing these days, as they say. So, yeah, I think it's fun where like the youth adopt a pop culture moment or a throwback, and they don't really even know what it is. They just know that people like it and they're going to wear it. And then us as parents, like who actually experience and like grew up with the brand, the bands, the IP, like we have to like explain to them what it is. And in a lot of instances, they don't even care. They just want to wear it, which I think is
Yeah,
super
they're like,
funny.
sure, dad, whatever. Like, it's cool music. Like, get the side eye, and yeah, that's exactly it.
I love it. So you've kind of come up in the some of these Midwest powerhouses like Colle+McVoy and talking about working at BBDO on the spam account and stuff like that. Do you think you not being like a coastal agency guy, New York, LA, has that given you a superpower? Has that given you a different point of view than some of your colleagues? How does the where you grew up and where you've lived and where you've spent your life kind of influenced your work as a creative that might be different than some of the coastal agencies?
Yeah, for sure. That's super interesting. We could make this a 3 hour, and I need to get a couch to sit and lay down and talk about that. I think a lot of it is just how I've been trying to be really intentional about how I sculpt my career and my life at the same time. Um, like I said, I grew up in Nebraska. I came up to Minneapolis and didn't expect to be here as long as I was. Um, Ended up meeting my wife, ended up, starting a family and that type of trajectory. But also from a career standpoint, I was really fulfilled and I was finding really creative opportunities to do work that was interesting, do work that was new, but then also maintain a life where I could do the book of spam on the side, or I could do my art, or I started an ice cream company with somebody, I helped with for 4 or 5 years. And it's like having those type of like curiosity or those type of like life moments, I felt, that was really fulfilling and really interesting. And I probably wouldn't have been able to have those if I had jumped to a coast and done some of that. I had a few opportunities. This is where like it gets to be the couch. Like I passed up a couple really interesting, big name agencies, 15 years ago. And at the time I was like, no, we were right in the middle of working on the book. The ice cream company was kind of just getting started. And it's like, no, like those are just as important to me as, doing fancy, shiny work. And so I think it just kind of ended up with this like rubric of like, life, how do I lead the life I want to live, around the people I want to be around. And career is an important part of it, but it wasn't the whole part of it. So I ended up kind of just making the Midwest my home and staying here and, have no regrets, in the sense of like, I'm making interesting things and I'm working with interesting people and I'm trying new things every day. And that's kind of all I'm looking for. Could I have probably gotten some shinier projects or some, bigger spots on the reel or something? Probably, but would I have, had the stories of red tape, an ice cream company or, starting a, website that had 190,000 followers on Facebook, like that type of stuff. Like, I don't know if I would have had all that similar life experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. It almost seems like you were kind of early to this culture now of what they call like the side hustle, right?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, really a lot of work, I feel like at this point is moving to this new model of like the white collar gig economy, right? So, I like you, I had 5 years at one agency, 9 years at another as the biz dev guy. And, not a lot of like moving around and stuff like that. And when I got laid off at my last agency because we lost a big piece of business after a year, um, I didn't get that full time offer that used to come every year
Yeah.
pretty regularly from recruiters. And I was like, man, I'm only 44. Like, what's going on? And then it's just the reality is that those jobs are, not as prevalent anymore. And the good news is, a year and a half into doing fractional biz dev for agencies and companies that want to get in front of brands and media agencies, I'm actually doing better than I've ever done. And it's kind of like
Oh, that's
running
great.
running an agency of one, right? Like you get to work on different clients, you get to be curious, and if one client goes away and there's 50 in the pipeline, you don't lose your job and you're out on the streets with a pink slip and no severance and
Yeah, you control your own
some of the
destiny.
other. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So
I mean, I think it goes to the fact like there's no right way to do this career, right? There's no right way to live. And I think that's more true today than even was 25 years ago when we started getting into the business, because then it was like, here's the career path, here's how you do it, here's how you ladder up. And I think that like the last 4 or 5 years, the relationship with our job has changed for so many reasons, from a cultural, COVID re-evaluating what's important, to the business model of holding companies that no longer, value loyalty. And you may not, like you said, have, tomorrow might be completely different. And it's no fault of your own. You had loyalty, you did a really good job, but, someone 12 states away decided they needed to cross off a line or whatever, and you're out of a job. So like that type of relationship has changed a lot. And then like I think that AI is really starting to impact how, juniors and mids and even seniors like work and how, the head count we need. And I think that it's been freeing in the sense that like there's no right way to do the career. And if you're younger, if you've got a lot, you don't have to do the steps that we did 5, 10 years ago. Come in and be a cultural expert, come in and be an AI expert, come in and be a social expert, or come in and have 3 different side hustles that make you super interesting and make you, an engaging person in the room that the client just wants to like have on a brand. Like there are ways to get involved now that aren't the rote, you go put in your blood, sweat, and tears at one place, and then you get moved up to TV, and then eventually you're going to get rewarded in golden handcuffs and golden helicopters. Like those just don't exist anymore. So it's finding creative ways to manage that career growth, I think, are going to be really important.
Yeah, I love that. You gave some really good advice, I think, in that statement for the juniors, right? Because I think that's the thing that I keep hearing is like, oh, well, AI is eliminating these entry level jobs that used to be considered grunt work, but they needed to get done, and that's how you kind of like earned your stripes, and you kind of had these repetitive tasks that weren't so glamorous, but it kind of got you ready for higher level roles. I love the enthusiasm and optimism that you're saying, hey, look, young people, juniors, are people coming out of school are just as relevant as ever because they have a point of view. They're digital natives. They may be AI natives. And really the things that they've done to flex their curiosity as their side hustle, whether it's, artistic projects or being a creator or running an e-com, drop ship company, or vibe coding a website, like those are all the skill sets that actually clients want to see and want to be a part of now. So that's how you train as a young person for the industry now, not just finding an internship and doing like boring work anymore.
Yeah, and it's our remit as an agency has changed completely, right? Like 20 years ago, I lament about, like back when I started at BBDO, it'd be like, here's $1 million, go stay at Shutters for 6 weeks and film 2 TV spots.
Sounds
And that
nice.
was sort of how that's how we operated. Like, it was great. Like, those are the good old days. Well, now it's like, great, you got $1 million. Can you do, 7 TV spots, 400 pieces of social content, 2,700 digital ads? Like, we've exploded in how we reach people. And I think that's because, the algorithm these days, the algorithm, everybody's Instagram is completely different. Everybody's TikTok is completely different. And so to talk to those people, you actually need volume of content so that the robots can read it and get it to the right people. And I mean, honestly, it's like, it's gotten so overwhelming. It's like who is a really great expert on TikTok? Who is a really great expert on, like, can you handle our Instagram strategy? Or you come in, you understand the algorithm, you understand, how to talk to different microcultures. Great. We need help because we still have 12 pieces of TV content. We've got 100, like, it's, the volume has gotten so much. You can find ways to sort of make yourself a specialty, so much easier. But it is sort of becoming that generalist of like, what is happening on social, what is happening on AI, and come in and be valuable. Be valuable. I mean, that's the one thing that hasn't ever changed, right? Is like, as a junior, your job, and this is not even a junior thing, your job is to make the person above you's life easier. That's true if you're a mid-level or a senior or whatever. It's, what can I do? How can I make your life easier? Yep, I'll help you. Let me take that off your plate. But as a junior, that's even triple more important, right? Like, you just showing up and it's like, yep, I can solve that. What do you got going on? Let me help you with that. I had some ideas. And that, that hasn't changed. That's how you continue to, like, once you get that foot in the door, or once you get that, that opportunity, is like, I got ideas. Let me show you. I got potential. Let me show it to you.
Love it. So let's talk about Preston Spire. What got you there? What was your journey to Preston Spire? Admittedly, an agency that I hadn't heard of until I got this pitch. So tell me about your creative philosophy. What drew you to the agency, and how do you guys stand out?
Yeah. Great question. So Preston Spire is Minnesota's oldest independent agency. They've actually been around for 75 years.
Holy cow.
And that's the key word. That's what drew me there, was independent. I had done my time. I think I threw all the holding companies at some point. And the latest one, Colle+McVoy, is owned by Stagwell. And,
right.
Holding companies they've kind of reached that, how do we maximize shareholder value at every turn? And it doesn't really matter, like you said, someone 7 states away is making decisions. And so for the last couple of years, I've been starting to talk to independent shops, because it is like, how do you control your own destiny? How do we be a little more nimble? What is like an independent, like from a local perspective, how do we drive the ship? And Preston Spire, like I said, the oldest independent agency in town, and built on like some really interesting work. They did, Taco John's work, 10, 15 years ago, where we had Whiplash, the cowboy monkey that was running around delivering Taco John's. And so they're built on this core of like, we want to do big ideas, we want to do fun ideas. And I was like, great, like independent, you have a vision of like growth and how we can kind of evolve into the future. You're a small ship in the harbor. We're not, a big giant lumbering iron ore ship that takes a while to turn. Like we can try new things. And especially now as we're, with AI and with the speed of what's being demanded, having that ability to pivot or make quicker decisions was really key. And that's what drew me there, is like, let's try some things and let's learn, and let's not do things the way we did yesterday tomorrow, let's be better tomorrow. And so that philosophy and, this sort of Midwest, like, we want to be around people that we enjoy to be around. Like, this business is hard enough. Like, I don't want to come in and hate my job every day. So how do we show up and, be hard on the work, but easy on the people, that type of like, I want to do better. I want to do better work, but I want to make sure people are growing, and what's your career path. And so just a lot of things lined up, and it just felt like a really nice progression for like, this next step for me to take of, going in and impacting a few more of the decisions quickly, to the point where like, even like within the first week, I was like, hey, Canva, I think that's a really powerful tool. I think we can help it get, social out a lot faster. I think we can use it for quicker presentations. Like, it's may not be the solve all, but I think it's worth us testing and learning from it. Great, go do it. And I was like, whoa, is there a committee? Like, should I send an email? Like, what do you mean? Okay, go do it. And it was like that. It was like a weird, like, even just, I knew that's what I was going towards, but even just for them to right away the day one be like, yeah, great, let's try it. That's refreshing. And I think with the complex business problems that we're getting, you have to have that level of autonomy and speed and ability to like pivot and try new things.
I love that. It's an interesting time we live in right now, where some of the top television shows and one of the most prolific producers of entertainment product is Taylor Sheridan, with the shows like Landman and Yellowstone and all the shows that he's created and all the success that he's having. And then you see, some of the most popular videos on social media or TikTok are, farmers out in the field, and like how they homestead and how they, bring their this obsession with the muscular class, and like, the people who like produce the fuel, fiber, and food, kind of in the quote unquote flyover states. Are you finding more brands coming to agencies like yours because they've spent too much time kind of speaking to the coasts and not thinking about middle America, and not thinking about where the majority of consumers and buying power actually is in the country? Do you feel like, Midwestern agencies have a different point of view and can lend, campaign ideas to brands that kind of speak to the rest of the world or rest of America versus just the coasts?
I mean, that's a really intriguing question. I think, yes, I think that, that's one of our superpowers here in the Midwest, is we are very purple, we're very diversified in our backgrounds. And when I was at the previous agency, we got approached from a coastal agency who actually was asking for help because they were pitching a milk brand, and nobody at the agency drank milk. And it was like the weirdest problem to like, and we're like, wait, what? Like, you have like 200 people at the agency, and they're like, yeah, everybody's really snobby against milk, and it's all oat milk and whatever. And we were like, well, yeah, we got people. Yeah, we got gallons of it in the fridge right now, whatever. And I think that's a little bit of the superpower of, there's a little bit of this Midwest, like, yeah, I mean, we got people here who, own guns, and we got people that, parents, it's all a melting pot of cultures and stuff. So I think we do have a brand in the Midwest that allows us to say like, no, we can kind of speak to the everyman. And, we we're not a coastal agency. We kind of have a Midwest flavor to ourselves.
Yeah, no, I really love that. So, one of the things that I've been asking agency leaders over the last year, like I feel like last year was kind of the hype cycle of AI, and this year is like the practicality of AI. So, as a creative, what is the one way that you are leveraging AI or the agency is leveraging AI that has transformed how you think about delivering work that is freeing up the most amount of time and resources? What's the most practical use case for a creative leveraging AI to be transformational to the business?
Yeah, no, that's a really good, great question, because I do think last year was a lot about the hype and a lot about the the fire hose. And I said on a podcast a couple weeks ago, I was like, I really think 26 will be a little bit more of like the concrete and the actual plan and a little bit of figuring things out. And we approach it as, like our philosophy at the agency is like AI is going to make us smarter and faster so we can spend time on the good stuff. We're in the business of
Mm.
critical thinking. And so at a minimum, it's like we have to get familiar with LLMs and like that level of like, how do we process information? How do we have it be a partner that can help us think faster? And it's not a catch-all. Like it's not this magical box that you can go and like just put in questions and get answers out of it. um I think we've been talking a lot about LLMs. I think the future is like in SLMs, like smaller language models, where it's really
Mm.
about having the right knowledge base in your Claude or Gem or GPT. That's like all the information around your agency or your tone of voice or here's your backstory or your manifesto, like getting all that baked really really well, and then treating the prompts as a verbal math problem. Like I mentioned, I was in engineering and architecture, so like my brain very math focused. I grew up in that world, and so like the idea of like, hey, you know, partner, robot partner, here's the math I need you to do. Here's the world we're in. I need you to combine it with this. I need you to give me these type of outcomes. And you give it like, I think it could be this. I think it could be this. I think it could be this big math equation almost. And then it just becomes that sparring partner that like, great, gives me 10 ideas, gives me 10 ways of phrasing a manifesto or 10 ways of like thinking about a strategy. And it's like, no, those are trash. Give me 10 more, or add a little bit of this into the recipe. Like, okay, you're off a little bit. I need more spice. So do this. Or, we've seen all the prompts online about like, pretend like you're Dimitri Martin or, like that type of stuff. And I think that's just adding elements to the recipe of this verbal math where you spar with it and you really hone in on like the right voice that gives you the right options. And I think then it's our job and why we're getting paid is to be the critical thinker that can go in there and be like, that's the one, or like, oh, I'm going to give that to my team. I think they can go off of that. So it's helping synthesize a lot faster. It's helping summarize a lot faster. It's letting us really take that, I think that's just from like an LLM perspective, right? Just like use that in your day to day, and then visually it's exciting. Like we no longer have excuses. AI can really give us big productions, or it can give us big visuals. And I think we're starting to maybe see a little bit the other side of it, where like clients are now like, oh, that's perfect, how do you go shoot that? It's that like you can't photocomp it too perfect. But in pitches and in mood boards and stuff like that, the visual generation has been obviously game changing. And I think that this will be the year where we start to just see more of those like fully generated worlds start to show up. Super Bowl's in a couple of days, and the Sven Vodka is getting all the press, right, for having like 100% AI video and 108% AI commercial. And it's like it's doing exactly what it needs to be doing. It's getting talked about, just like the Coke holiday ad and stuff like that. But I think that there'll be more better discussions this year of like, when should it be used, how should it be used appropriately, when it starts to turn into that visual generation that gets out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like the AI productions are almost at this point a PR stunt. There are definitely, I hear of a lot of brands using it, a lot of agencies and brands using it for the pre-production process, like you said, now you don't just come in with a mood board and sketches and photo comps. You come in with like full, basically shot by shot, demonstrations. And then you just take that, that comp, and then you go out and shoot the real thing. Of course, with a little bit of creative freedom to still, do some other things, but at least you have it pretty tight before you go into a production environment.
And production,
yeah, I love
mean,
that.
we have a photo shoot coming up, and we're basically like, let's explore it from traditional photos to, real people, AI background, full AI. One company we're talking to is like, we'll scan the people and they're going to be real people, but we're going to be able to control them in AI, and that spectrum has been really interesting, because it's like, if we're doing backgrounds that are AI, what's the difference between a CGI background from 6 years ago and an AI background? It's just, robots building things for us. But I think it's really important that it's, we find the right applications. And I think it'll be, eventually 10 or 15 years, it'll be just like CGI, right? We don't even notice it. Like, hopefully it'll just be used in ways that like plus up, but don't necessarily overtake. And like you said, now it's the idea. In a few years, hopefully it'll just be like Photoshop or, whatever, just like CGI. Like, it's just going to be sort of ubiquitous and kind of blend into the background.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, one of the hot topics at IAB and what I feel like is the next hype cycle of AI is the idea of agents, or the agentic world, where AI is not just going to be a co-pilot, but it's going to be a co-worker. You're going to have one or multiple agents out there doing tasks for you, kind of, in the background while you're sleeping. Have you seen any interesting use cases of agentic in the creative side of the agency world yet?
From the creative side, I think it's probably going to be just in like the versioning, and like, here's some images and some headlines, give me 300 different sizes and iterations that we can go test. Like, I think it's probably from a production standpoint that I've seen the agentic seem to be bubbling up. I see it probably being used a little bit more just in like the strategy and the research or whatever, like, agentic, like, out there looking for competitor information or looking for, brand mentions and stuff like that, and synthesizing and putting it into a report for you, or, you're running a podcast, the idea of like an agentic, taking the podcast recording and cutting it up and putting it across my socials and, doing bite size. Like, I think that's the type of thing where it's the grunt work. It's this busy work that like takes a lot of time and is very repetitive. That's where I think we're going to see the easiest and quickest adoption, letting us like go back and focus on the good stuff and letting us focus on the critical thinking and the taste and the design that we need. But, no longer having a studio person sitting there and manually laying out, 1,200 banner ads. Like, no, we're just going to hit a button and it takes care of it.
Yeah, or just, yesterday I used it to like gross up a media plan and like add commas and dollar signs. And that would have taken me like 20 minutes to do before. Like, you get this big media plan. It's like, all right, I got to gross up all these formulas and just add dollar signs and commas. And, AI does it for you in 10 seconds. So it's like that admin task. It's just so helpful, right?
Yeah. Well, it enables you to do a lot more. I think that's what we're going to see too. And I think this is what I would, tell the kids too, is, it used to be you were really like a T-shaped expert, right? Where it's like, I specialize in art direction, and it's like, I'm an art director, and that's my deep expertise, and I kind of have a shallow knowledge of all this stuff. AI kind of lets you kind of go to more of a square or blow it out a little bit. Like, AI lets me be a mediocre strategist, my perfect no, but it allows me to like get my thinking and get my strategy, quicker than I can share with the team or share with the strategist. And, allows me to be a mediocre writer. I can sort of like get words to a place, and, I'm not a writer background, and writers that, craft those headline, the 10% of writing that is like craft, like the AI won't replicate that, but it will replicate the synthesizing, or take a 60 and break it into a 30. And, it makes me kind of an okay editor. It makes me kind of an okay copywriter, an okay strategist. And I think that's where the ability as a someone coming into the business is, find a way to sort of like learn about a lot of the other disciplines, like because AI can teach you like, what's a media plan? How would I pull this together? Oh, okay. Now I'm like 10% of a media planner because I understand it better. AI taught me or helped me do it. So it's, use AI as a teaching buddy or like a coach to like become a mediocre expert at a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just this morning, I had a sponsor on the show that was like basically a CRM for agencies company called Go High Level, and they gave me a lifetime membership to the software. I was like, maybe I should like set that up. It's it's free, and why not? But it's pretty technical stuff, and like you're doing like DNS domains and API domains and stuff that's like way over my pay grade. And I figured it all out this morning just by asking ChatGPT, like, what's a subdomain brand headline? How do you register for one? How do you do an API domain? And it like literally just tells you exactly how to do it and all the code and all that stuff. So yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
And I've had fun even just trying like to make art with it. Like I do these ridiculously dumb 5-foot felt fish and 5-foot felt birds. Like they're just these like incredibly elaborate, like 20,000 pieces of felt that I use a CNC cutter to make or whatever. So they're really bright and they're really colorful. And I was iterating the next round of what I wanted to do. And so I actually took the images of the art I had done and I fed it into Claude or whatever. And I was like, describe to me these images. Like, what are these? Make it very, very detailed. And then I took that back and I said, okay, now here's what this is my style. This is what I want the next piece to be. And I was like, I want it to be a big eagle. I want it to have 6-inch, 6-foot wings. And I started to really describe like in my head what I really wanted it to be. And then it started pumping out visuals. And it was like, oh, it could be something like this, like this, like this, like this. And it was like, I probably did 200 variations. And I went into Photoshop and I was like, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And it kind of became a really interesting creative partner where I trained it, the small language model on like my art. And then I basically partnered with it to say, take that art and now do this with it. And we got to a place that it kind of was a fun little exercise where I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I saw in my head. Now I can like, use that as my guiding post or whatever.
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of like your brainstorm. So you don't have to like waste a bunch of time, like taking stabs at things that, aren't exactly what you're thinking. And you have a bunch of false starts, essentially, I imagine, in the artistic process where you're like, nah, that's not it. I'm just going to throw it away and start over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, to make that applicable to our business, that's super, like, hey, it's back to the math. Like, I really like, this is, a manifesto I wrote a while ago, or this is like where we're at. I sure would love it to be a little more sassy or whatever, like, I need more edge. Here's things that I think have edge, and then, oh, okay, now let's work with this. Or you copy paste and you piece together 3 of its outputs and you're like, okay, let's work off of this. And to have that like partner for whatever, like if I'm writing a business plan or I'm writing a manifesto or whatever, it is just a really fast brainstorm partner. Doesn't solve any, like, it's horrible at coming up with a new idea. Like, it will never connect. It will never make an insight that is like brilliant, because it's great at averaging or it's great at like doing math. But if you're that person that's able to connect or say like, I think it needs to be an insight like this or whatever, then it will help you run faster, further with it.
Love it. Well, Dustin, exciting conversation. Really appreciate you spending some time with the audience today. If people want to learn more about Preston Spire or connect with you directly, where would you like to send the audience?
Sure. Preston Spire is PrestonSpire.com. And then my personal one is DustinBlack.com. So got my email in there. You could get to my art if you need. And those are the 2 easiest.
Amazing. And if there's anybody out there who's watching the show for the first time, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening to the show, a organic review is how we find a larger audience. And if there's a brand manager or a marketer out there that maybe needs some Midwestern sensibility to their work, or maybe a creative or a young person who wants to get some great career advice from Dustin on how to get into the agency world today, or if there's somebody out there that really loves spam, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will bid you a good day. Happy Super Bowl weekend, Dustin. And thanks again for spending some time with us today.